Hello and welcome back to another episode of Inside Voices First Takes. Our first one in quite some time. My apologies. I have been on the road working on another show, but I'm back now. And as always, I am your host, Adam Rubin.
And I'm your co-host, Colin Bennick.
And today, First Takes is taking on First Man.
But why, some say, the moon? Why climb the highest mountain? We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Ooh, Colin, an interesting one this week. Very interesting, I thought. What did you think of this movie?
Well, after getting over my disappointment that this movie was not about Adam, the first man in general, that was a bit of a shock. I know, especially I thought it was after your namesake. I was a little disappointed.
You're lucky. You're lucky to get as much Adam as you do in your life. All right? Can't have everything.
That's true. No, seriously though, going to this, I had heard many good things. Critics were had very many great things to say about it. I went in. And the movie didn't quite hit the highs that the critics made me think the movie was going to do. Still, I think a solid movie. I just felt it was a little not quite. It was a little bit overhyped, I guess, for me when I left the theater. Still liked it, still good, but not quite like I had heard like Oscar talks and all that, especially because it's the same director of Whiplash and La La Land, Damien Chazelle. Definitely, I think, inferior to both of those movies.
Really?
Yeah, me personally, I think it's still good. I just think his other two movies were better.
Mm-hmm. So, well, I'm very curious as to why that is, because I'd heard vague things that, like, oh yeah, looks good, looks like a good movie. I didn't get a lot of hype, and I intentionally avoided most of it, so I was spared that. But I'm really curious, what is it that you thought wasn't in this movie that was in those other two movies? What is it that you think that his other movies had up on this one? Were they directorial things or were they script issues?
I don't think it was directorial things. I think the type of story they elected to tell in regards of how they framed the space race this way, and specifically the moon landing, was a little bit, I guess, compared to like movies like The Right Stuff, or even like a sci-fi, more of a sci-fi movie like The Martian, which still involves space travel and NASA. Those movies kind of had a little bit more of a what's the word? More like a more encompassing, inspirational feel about space voyage in general. How it should be, hopeful and optimistic, because that's what space is. Like Star Trek view of space, a more emotional, but like optimistically emotional portrayal. Even in The Right Stuff, it kind of covered everything about the space race from beginning to end, not viewing it as just from a specific prism that this movie did. Which it was a good choice. It's a different type of choice. I just think though you limit the grandiose and the awe that other movies have done regarding space that this movie does not have. This movie is a little more cold, a little more detached in terms of its view of the space race. And one part in the spoiler section I'll get to later illuminated that specifically. But I thought it was definitely a different take, which I appreciated. I just didn't think it was as good of a take as I see other films. That's why I say it comes up.
Well, and it's interesting because the part of what the take is in this movie is that it's so hyper focused on being from Neil Armstrong's perspective. Right. It does not have that third person perspective or that omniscient perspective that those other movies that you discussed do. It keeps you very much limited to, for the most part, what is happening with Neil Armstrong, which I thought at some points made it very effective. Because I think a problem that you have in these movies is that at this point, we've all seen Apollo 13. We've all seen all of these movies, frankly. If you're into this movie, you've definitely seen all the classics. And we just, in the modern blockbuster age, seeing a planet, seeing a spaceship, those aren't amazing things to us anymore because we've just seen them so much. We have seen that before. I thought that this movie made a really interesting choice in trying to reground the experience of putting you in the capsule, giving you much more of a POV of like, here's what it's really like. Here's how intense this is as an experience as opposed to how intense it is as a concept. And I thought that was really interesting.
I agree. And I'm saying it wasn't ever emotional. No, like the whole Armstrong journey, especially in regards to what happened to him personally in the beginning of the movie and affects him later on. Very, very strong. I thought it was very strong. But it depends on your taste, I guess. I just wanted, if it's going to be about Apollo 11, which eventually, that's what the movie is gearing up to. As much as we want to focus on Neil, and we should, like Neil wasn't the only one involved in this. Like the we get a little bit of Buzz Aldrin in this movie, a little bit sprinkled throughout there, but we get like nothing of the third guy, Michael Collins. He barely has a presence. And if you're gonna do a movie about the moon landing, he's pretty important. I'm just like, couldn't you have fit in a little bit more of the other characters who are gonna be in the spaceship with Neil? You can still focus on Neil for most of it, but maybe give a little bit of a nod to Buzz and Michael as well. That's just.
But on the other hand, the movie is not called First Landing. It's called First Man. The movie makes no apologies for the fact that it's not about the moon landing. It's about Neil Armstrong. That's what the movie's about. Which we are drawn to it being about more than that and being bigger than him and bigger than that. I thought it was really interesting to see a movie that contained itself really, for the most part, to him. We do, of course, get some of the other characters, but for the most part, we are contained to Neil. And I think that at most of the time, I appreciated that. Although, doubling back to what you were saying about the movie feeling cold, certainly colder than some of those other, like The Right Stuff, which is a pretty warm movie and filled with comedy and all kinds of things. Yeah. The fact that we're so focused on Neil Armstrong and the fact that his character in this movie, he's cold. He's a cold guy. I think that definitely contributed to that impression, is that you are absolutely right. There is something a little bit less optimistic, a little bit less emotionally triumphant about this movie. It's not a triumphant movie.
Which I think is not necessarily a problem, but I think in terms of how viewers might feel upon seeing this movie, they might feel a little bit let down. I had a friend who saw it before me, basically said, like the whole point of the movie is basically saying, was the space race worth it? Was it all worth it, in terms of all what has happened, the cost, human and otherwise? And by the end of the day, was it worth it? And he said the movie's message basically like, I guess. And that's not a good enough way to do this movie.
I don't agree with that. I
mean, in terms of the actual, how many lives how many lives had to be lost, how much money had to be spent, and how many failures had to happen in order for this one it was a fantastic moment in history. But you do see how much of a burden this was on not just America or these specific people, but the planet. The movie's kind of like, okay, you did it. Look at how much it cost you, which is kind of a little bit of a depressing view of the moon landing, which, again, I don't hate it. I actually find it a very bold move to do. I'm just thinking that people are thinking of seeing it, just be prepared. That is the type of movie you're probably going to get.
And I don't think that is what the movie says about the moon landing. I don't think it does focus on those things. It certainly brings those things up. It certainly asks the question. But there's definitely never any doubt, certainly not in Neil Armstrong's mind, that it's completely worth it. The movie presses on. I don't think the movie does come to the conclusion that, was this worth it? I think that it brings up the fact that a lot of people were asking that, and for good reason. but that it ultimately does land on the fact that, yes, it was. I mean, the movie definitely celebrates the moon landing.
I think the movie said it was worth it for Neil, especially because, and this is where a little bit of fiction happened in the movie, but and again, should we go into spoilers now? I think it's time to get into spoilers, by the way.
Let's get into it. It's history, so
okay.
Spoilers, but yes, okay. We're gonna get into the details now. So before we do, real quick, I say see the movie. I think people should see the movie. I think this is a movie that benefits from being seen in a movie theater, and that it's completely worth it. What do you think?
I would agree, especially if you happen to get it in IMAX. The entire lunar landing is in IMAX. I saw it in the AMC IMAX, not quite the full thing, but close enough, and it looked glorious. But yeah, I think it is worth seeing. Just know it's not your typical, historical space movie. Just know that.
True. There's a little bit more of a family drama than that.
Right.
But definitely see it. Check it out. It's worth seeing. All right. So stay with us. We're going to get into the heat of the meat here. You were saying the fictional thread of his daughter.
For Neil, the journey is worth it because, by the end, he kind of gets to say goodbye to his daughter by throwing the wristband of his daughter who had died 9 years earlier from cancer into the crater. Now, I actually looked this up and was like, did this even actually happen? All signs point to no, but there is enough gray area. Apparently, like, Neil did not tell people that he lost his personal effects or something because they have it in a museum somewhere back home. So why would he say that he lost it? Maybe people think that's why he was hiding something in order to put on the moon. And I know other astronauts have put stuff of their loved ones on the moon since Apollo 11. Mm-hmm. So I get that there's maybe a mystery conspiracy about maybe this happened. But in the kind of movie,
it's some artistic license, sure.
It's a little bit artistic license, but it does work in terms of showing how for Neil this was like a cathartic need in order to say goodbye to his daughter once and for all, a way of moving on. But again, like you said, because it's just from Neil's perspective, for Neil, it is worth it. They have an entire montage, like halfway through the movie, before the Apollo missions, of just showing the protests and all the graves and the signs of why can't we support the poor? Why is this money being wasted on, people catching on fire in tests for Apollo 11? Like, you could have cut that from the movie, and you could have still had the message of was the cost worth it? And you by the end say, yes, it was. But they purposely put that montage in to make you think, just for 3 people to do this because 10 others died, that's not the best math in terms of making this worth it.
I mean, but it drives home the intensity of it, right? Like, that stuff's in the movie because the point is it's taking a huge toll on all of them. And that makes it all the greater when they're ultimately able to overcome that and succeed. Because everybody was on the same page. I mean, that success was shared by other astronauts who had died. It was shared by, they were able to accomplish it, as he acknowledges, because of all the failures before. We fail here, so we don't fail up there. That no great deed can be done without great sacrifice. The movie makes these people out to be heroes. It doesn't give you the impression that that it was a waste of time or a waste of life. It gives the impression that this is the greatest thing man's ever done, and it was due to the fact that these people were willing to make this sacrifice. It just gives you that perspective. But I don't think the movie ultimately comes down on the side of ooh, was that a good thing to do? It definitely thinks it was a good thing to do. It celebrates the end.
Okay, and I actually, you know what? There is a moment at the end when they're back in quarantine and they're rewatching an old JFK conference, and I think it's the clip, the quote he says is "We do these things because they are not easy. It is because they are hard."
Most famous quote in history. You probably could have gotten it right, but all right, it's close enough.
Not the most famous quote in history.
It's close enough. That's the gist of what he said.
But you're right. That moment is kind of you know what? Yes, eventually it was worth it. I just thought the movie dwelt on so much.
Every magazine, every newspaper article, all of humanity, smiling and watching the television and waving American flags. I mean, it's very celebratory.
It mostly is.
It is.
It mostly is. I'm saying. I'm just saying. Up until that point, the movie's focus was so not that. or at least so more tempered in terms of expectation and whether all like previous movies have made it seem like all of the world was united about this. It was everybody was go for the moon, and this movie just like no, pump the brakes. Look how it affected certain families of the dead astronauts. Look how it affected certain disenfranchised individuals who felt that way, which is a different perspective. And I applaud it for that. I'm just was worried, was it too focused on that different perspective rather than focusing on the more traditional, this is the best thing for humanity in a long time. That's just my 2 cents.
And fair enough.
So, in terms of, like you said, bringing it back to the groundedness, the realisticness of these missions, the Gemini 8 malfunction. Ooh, I mean, I don't pass out, at anything like that. But watching the thing spin so hard and so fast, I honestly can't believe anybody survived that incident. That was like probably my favorite filmmaking scene, just in terms of how great it came across and how scary it was, just completely frightening. So
they did a great job with that.
Personally, for me, like more moon landing looked beautiful, but the Gemini 8, spinning topsy-turvy scene, ooh, that was fantastic, I have to say.
My favorite filmmaking scene in this, my favorite one was the tragedy of the astronauts dying in that fire.
Oh, okay.
The way they did the test where you see them, they say the lines from their radio comms that we know they said.
Right.
And then they cut back to the exterior of the door.
Right.
You just see
the explosion impact.
Right. You just see the poof, that pop in the door. Yeah. And that's all. And we just hold on it because we held on it for so long before we went in. People who are not aware that test ends that way are going to be like, all right, we're kind of holding on this door for a long time. To get the payoff for that, I thought that was so well done. It wasn't overly graphic, and I thought it was so much more powerful to just see it from the outside and just have that little bit of smoke. I thought that was really, really tremendous restraint on the part of how they chose to shoot that. I thought that was amazing, really amazing.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what I didn't like so much, and I think it actually feeds into what you didn't like so much, is I did not really care for the way that they did the ending of this film. To me,
like
the ending...
Or like the ending of the moon landing?
The actual end of the movie, the last scene of the movie.
Okay.
That reunification with his wife, in silence in the room, that we don't really get anything. It's just the hint of it, without any of the moving forward, without any of the resolution. And I think that is why you left the movie feeling like, oh, that wasn't that optimistic. I think it's really that it's just not that optimistic about him personally as a man. I think this movie has a very mixed view of Neil Armstrong more than it has a mixed view of the space program, which is interesting because, of course, his especially his first film, but even his second film, he loves these obsessive characters.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's definitely, in terms of just learning new things about Neil Armstrong, this movie was very enlightening in terms of, I did not know he had a daughter that died very early on. I did not know how just kind of analytical and calculative, just how focused he was just like on all the math and stuff than like his other compatriots at NASA. So definitely, like I said, like a different type of Neil Armstrong than I was expecting. So, and I thought Ryan Gosling did a good job with the material he was given, I thought. Yeah. Great supporting cast. The wife character, also, Claire Foy, did a great job.
She steals the show. She steals the movie.
The scene where she yells at Coach Taylor for Friday Night Lights, that was great. And even the score was unusual in a way, in terms of like kind of a classical, not like a big raha, epic, swelling music type of thing. Kind of a little violin, melodic, soft type of music. So
yeah,
overall, I think I
liked it.
This movie, definitely good. I mean, maybe 6.5 or 7. I'm not sure quite yet. Probably landing on 7. I'll say. I'll go 7.
Okay, and I'm going to give it an 8.5. I'm going to give this movie an 8.5.
Okay.
I thought for what it is, it's very well done. I don't love everything about it, but It's genuinely a lovely movie.
All right, you heard it here first, folks. That's a 7 from Wah and an 8.5 from Adam. That is one small score from Adam, but one giant leap for Inside Voices.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
This is what you get for the whole JFK quote. You deserve that. Anyway, from all of us at Inside Voices, I am Colin Binnick.
And I'm Adam Rubin.
And we'll see you next
I am Adam. I mean, listen, I am Adam Rubin, and I promise that whatever we see next, it will not be another 3 months from now. But if you'd like to know what I was doing the last 3 months, check out Scraps on FYI. Fun cooking show.
Plug you there.
Smooth tie-in. We'll see you next time.